now that I think we've got everybody on board, I'd like to kind of dive into it and welcome everybody to our online workshop today. Let me go ahead and introduce ourselves. So Romy.
Great. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is the first in our series of online workshops that we're going to be hosting. My name's Romy Benninga. I'm a market access and MedTech consultant.
And I'm Daniel Young. I'm the founder and lead strategist for Digital HealthWorks.
And perhaps just a little bit about Digital HealthWorks to get things going. So we're a commercialization agency. As the name suggests, we help digital health and medtech ventures bring their medical innovations to the US and European markets. So we've got an amazing team kind of dotted around the world in Boston, Berlin, and Lisbon. And we focus on 3 core areas of our expertise, which are regulatory, market access, and sales. And so the idea for these workshops is really to have kind of a casual and open discussion, where we're going to start off with a 10 to 15-minute presentation, followed by like a 10-minute discussion and question and answer session at the end. So feel free to use the Q&A functionality or just unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras and interact as you'd like. But yeah, otherwise, let's get going.
Great. Well, thanks, Romy, for the introduction, kind of queuing us up today. But as you know, the invite said, today the goal is to give you an introduction to the importance of partnerships within your while you're building your digital health or medtech venture. So basically, I want to start off by something that's not really the most encouraging thing. 95% of health tech companies or health innovation companies end up failing. Because in my personal experience, I've seen hundreds of projects, and oftentimes they're developed by really smart, intelligent, well-motivated people. However, they are very good at building the science and building the product, but they fail to understand what the requirements of building a business around their product are. So unfortunately, that usually leads to the undoing of the enterprise. So the goal of our workshops in general, and especially of today, is to talk about, share tips, tricks, and experiences to help you kind of be more equipped to go down the path of entrepreneurship in the digital health space. And the one thing that I think everybody needs to understand when they get started is that you need to have good partners at every step along the way. Good partners are vital to making forward progress, to kind of moving not only the idea of the research forward, but the rest of the work that you need in order to be able to convert an idea through its TRLs into a viable product, and then take that product, put that into a business, and get that out into the marketplace. So the goal of today's presentation and discussion is really to help you kind of understand the basics of a partnership, what to look for in partnerships, and then how to kind of take those first steps in order to build successful partnerships that will help you ideally improve your chances of success down the line. So what can a good partner contribute? There's different things at different phases. And the early stages that you're developing your research or you're developing your product, having good partners that can share expertise or knowledge about the science or the clinical application of your product, or just use cases within a care environment. They can then help you once you're starting to mature that development into more of a product, either by feeding you information, tips and tricks, or introduce you to other researchers where you could share knowledge. They can help coordinate validation studies. You can get partnerships around regulatory, market access, and then later stages to help you with strategic business relationships that can help you get traction within the market. So all of these partners are going to not be incorporated in one particular person or entity. There's going to be different places and different times that you're going to need different partnerships. But the one commonality amongst all of them is the fact that you're not going to walk alone. You're going to need to have somebody alongside with you to help guide you and to help point out opportunities, and also to help steer you clear of self-inflicted problems, if you would, by making mistakes that others have already made before you, so you don't have to repeat those yourself. So just always keep in mind that the goal of partnerships is to lean on the support of others, because together we're really all in this for one reason: to help patients and to help caregivers deliver better care. So I want to, before I get into talking about building out partnerships, I want to get into kind of a little bit of theoretical topics with it about what really is a strategic partner. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is simply because partnership is a term that's used very loosely, and it means a lot of things and different things to different people. So I wanted to get us a little bit oriented first on what we're talking about here. And so strategic partnerships are important because they're basically a relationship between two entities where there's a common objective and both can align their resources to achieve that objective. And the way that I look at describing this is it's really bi-directional, that there's an exchange of value from one party to another party that roughly makes it worth everybody's while to contribute and help each other along. So for example, we're working with a startup that is doing research in the medical AI space. For confidentiality, I'm going to obfuscate the details a little bit. But their goal is that they need data, they need annotations, and they need insight of how image enhancements can be used in the clinical care path. In exchange for being able to work with certain radiologists and clinicians, they're going to allow them to publish their studies and be co-authors of the paper. So for the research institution, they get another chance to publish academic articles. For the startup, they get the benefit of clinical experience, clinical data, and the use of the facility. So that's an actual example of a bi-directional relationship. Now, for the context of the remainder of our discussion, that's going to be the focus of the kinds of partnerships I want to help you understand their value and then figure out pathways that you can develop these relationships and then establish the partnerships and cultivate them over time. What I don't want to get into too much today is really this partnership that's actually a vendor-customer relationship, where the exchange of value is one company or one entity provides something to another in exchange for money. That's really a business transaction and not really the kinds of partnerships that we're looking to do. But data partnerships are a little bit different. So oftentimes now that we're all really working in one way, shape, or form or another around machine learning and AI, there's an immense need for data, imaging data, patient data, clinical outcomes, whatever it might be. And there's entities out there with a lot of data. But exchanging data, sharing data back and forth isn't necessarily the same as sharing the value and insight that a bi-directional strategic partnership can present you. So the data partnerships, I do want to talk about in our question and answer period a bit later, but for the sake of the strategic partnerships, the idea and the intent is to dwell on those because these are the ones that will help you uncover new opportunities, new insights, get through particular like tactical or strategic challenges and open up doors and benefit with their access and resources that they've got. Okay, so by the way, if at any point in time anybody has any questions or wants to ask something, feel free to just kind of cut me off and step in because that's the casual nature that I hope from this kind of online workshop. Okay, good. Then let's keep going. So let's discuss recruitment. So recruiting, the whole thing about like a partnership is that you're not going to find partners easily because there's a lot of different institutions doing different things, and within each institution there's physicians, there's researchers, and there's just a lot of people doing a lot of really cool things. But in order for you first to understand what kind of partnerships to go after, you need to understand first what your needs are. And it may sound really obvious, but to a lot of startups that I talk to, sometimes the need of knowledge or insight isn't so obvious. Like looking at let's say a digital therapeutic in the mental health space. There, like I was talking to one company I was mentoring earlier today, and they have a very clear solution that they want to bring to the market, but they're still under the mindset that we have to figure out how we're going to get reimbursed for our mental health app. But in fact, one of the things that becomes very clear and be listening to them was that social services and non-traditional ways of deploying their app to the patients who need it or to the people who need it isn't directly going through a healthcare provider and then a traditional reimbursement model, but actually going through a social services model. So the partners that they need to explore these ideas and figure out if there's an opportunity for a pilot project are shifting away from this traditional model more towards social care. So for them to understand what do they need in one of these partners, they need to know what social programs are targeted at which patients or which people, and then who are the operators and the influencers within those. So for them, they're understanding a new need that they have for finding these kinds of strategic partners. And that at least gives them the baseline to start looking for them. Now, the baseline is just knowing that you need somebody, but knowing when and where you need them and what do you need from strategic partners is another aspect of it. So we're all familiar with developing our product roadmaps. We know when we're going to do our sprint planning. We know when we're going to do this kind of development. We know when we're going to do validation testing. We know when we want to do deployments, et cetera. We think about that, and many people that I talk to think about that from the perspective of developing a product, through prototyping to clinical validation to going out into the field. But they don't necessarily map out the needs for their partnerships on their product roadmap. And so one of the best practice tips that I wanted to share, an experience that I've seen in some successful companies, is that as they're developing what they need to be doing on a Gantt chart or a planning chart into the future, they're understanding what the requirements are for their partnerships. For clinical validation, do they need physicians to be able to review and annotate data? Do they need to have partnerships with hospitals? Are they looking to have engagements with elder care facilities or nursing homes or ambulatory care services? Or is it a logistics kind of operation where they need to be dealing with a back office operations or something like out in the field delivering medical equipment? Whatever your specific need is, you need to understand why that partnership will give you value. When on your development timeline, on your roadmap, are you going to need to engage with them so that you could start looking for them into the future? Because finding a partnership is not going to be something that happens overnight. What you need to be able to do is first understand, who you need, when you need them, and then a strategy in order to approach them. And so part of this approach is how to pitch your value proposition of what you're doing. So for example, if you are doing an in-home care model and you have some sort of like remote patient monitoring technology, the value proposition has to be really clear with your partners so that they can understand, you're relevant to me, you could be useful, I can learn something from you, or I can share in an opportunity. So that value proposition has to be efficient, get your point across so that the other side can determine if you're relevant to them. Then you can start diving into talking about the specifics of the partnership. So attracting them, they're not going to come to you. It's not like you're a magnet and you're just going to pull people in from the awesomeness of your startup vision, unfortunately. So you're going to really have to think about this as a sales approach. So what you want to do with it, if you're following a sales approach, is spend a lot of time researching and targeting who could be a good prospect or for a partner at that particular juncture in your roadmap. So if you're looking for somebody to help you with clinical validation or to do pilot studies or field studies, you want to be thinking about that long into the future, I should say, looking ahead, if you would, so that you could start to identify who could be relevant partners and then start to drill into each one of those organizations to find the individual people there that could potentially be advocates and champions for you in developing and structuring and then administering the partnership down the stream. So these are some quick tips on what's it look like to find a good partner. It all starts with kind of knowing who you are, who your company is, who your venture is, and where you want to go, and then understanding who the players are in your field. Depending on what aspect of health tech you're working with, the players are going to be different. The names, however, might be the same. You might be dealing with pharma or large hospital systems or whatnot, but you have to dig deeper and look for the people inside and who's actually influencing and making things happen. Then you've got to find and define how your agenda and what you want from the partnership is going to align with their goals. Because while a partnership may seem perfect on the surface, the problem is that if your agenda doesn't align with your partner's agenda, then there won't be an opportunity to coordinate activities and there won't be a successful partnership. So alignment of the greater goals is going to be super important. And in order to do, the next step beyond that is really looking at then how do you understand what you're going to give to the partnership as well as what you want from the partnership. And that's going back to that idea that this is a bi-directional relationship. And the transaction has to be equal in value to either party for it to really honestly work. Otherwise, if it's lopsided and one party's taking from the other side, the one who's giving won't be so motivated over time to really contribute because they're not getting anything out of it. So a way of keeping things equal and making sure that you understand everything, both parties, I should say, is I'm very big on the idea of getting commitments written on paper. May it be through a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding, a series of emails, documentation, whatever. It needs to be somewhat binding from the purposes of establishing a commitment to work together. Then once you have that, the next step is to really make sure that you plan the project and the partnership out like any other joint venture you would work on. You want to know what you're going to kick off, what the objectives are, what the milestones are going to be, and what your expected outcomes are. And then have accountability built in there that if somebody's not pulling their own weight, then there has to be something that you guys have pre-agreed on that will allow for accountability to kick in if somebody's underperforming or if the relationship is not going in the way that you want it to. And throughout the whole process, you always want to be measuring forward progress. Is this working? Are you benefiting from it? Is it a healthy relationship? So these are the things when you're going into a partnership that you got to keep in the back of your mind, because at these different phases in your development, you're going to be asking different things of different partners. So at early stages, you might look at technology sharing or licensing or some sort of like mutual exploration. In later stages, it might be something about business connections or business opportunities, pilot projects at a hospital or care facility, whatever that particular stage is. It will have its own needs, and partnerships will be appropriate at that point. And you need to understand what you want and what you are able to give in order to identify the right partners at that time. So when it comes time to engaging partners, which is, I think, one of the most substantive things, is that you've got to keep an understanding that this is a relationship, and relationships take work. And in order for you to get the most out of a partnership, you need to be clear about what the expectations are, what you're going to give the partnership, and what you're going to get from the partnership. Absolutely super important. Then once you've gone through the LOIs and the MOUs and you've established that commitment and written those expectations on paper, one of the most important things to kick off the project is establish liaisons. A project manager on your side, the project manager on your partner's side. And these two people need to communicate frequently and often, because you as a startup or you as a smaller venture are going to be able to move a lot quicker than presumably your corporate partner that could take days to weeks to be able to respond to something or provide you with insight or something like that. So in order to keep working and keeping the momentum going forward, that's the importance of having an internal champion on the other side. And the communications back and forth, you're able to share frustrations, problems, challenges, things you don't understand, and be able to kind of like develop a good relationship so that you can work through situations. But you, as the outsider coming into a partnership, or presumably the smaller one, should always keep in mind you need to be the most organized in the relationship. You need to be going in there with agendas, with talking points, with decks, whatever you need to do to facilitate the communications and facilitate the forward progress on your partnerships. This will be very well respected, not just from your liaison on the other side, but by their staff, their managers, and their stakeholders who are involved in the partnership, because they'll clearly see that your organization is professional and takes it seriously. And with that, they'll respect you for it, and they'll give you a lot more consideration than maybe other partnerships or other programs that they've got going on. And that honestly will pay big dividends later on with the quality of the information, the quality of the deliverables that your partner will give you. But all the way throughout this, you need to always be monitoring it and have clear endpoints, clear measurements, clear KPIs, if you want to call them that, throughout the relationship to make sure that it's healthy, to make sure that it's working. And if you're starting to get to a point where things are divergent, maybe they're underperforming, or the quality of the data or the information isn't good, or there's a complete misunderstanding, you need to be able to break the relationship up, because you're just wasting time and you're just going to waste energy and money. Which brings me to the last point. You need to understand who's paying for what. So from a corporate perspective, when they're looking at working with a startup or a venture, One of the things that is not talked about often, but is definitely top of mind in a subconscious way is, will this business or will this entity have the money to see the partnership through, and will they be able to survive long enough to get to the end point of the relationship? You as a startup need to be able to be honest with yourself to say, can you afford this partnership? Is there financial commitment that you have to make, and time in terms of the time of your staff, resources, things you have to buy, things you have to do, and the reciprocal is true for them. On the partner side, did they budget resources for the partnership? Because I've seen, unfortunately, more than a few occasions where a partnership is laid out, all of the paperwork is done in a good way, but the other side never really took it seriously. And the manager who approved the partnership didn't allocate budget and resources to be able to fund the partnership. So upfront, when you're setting expectations, you also want to be clear that the resources are going to be made available and are going to be appropriate to the task at hand to get to the outcome you guys both desire. So I dumped a lot of information in a few minutes on you, but I think it was longer than a few minutes. But the goal and the main takeaway, I'm going to stop sharing screens here in a moment, is really about, I covered a lot of ground from a very high level about some tips and tricks having to do with partnerships. But what I'm hoping to do now as we transition more into a discussion and Q&A is to share some stories with you about partnerships, either from my personal experiences or from our collective experiences, so that those experiences can be shared and we can benefit from them all. So with that, I think Romy and I would like to thank you for the formal part of our presentation. And just as a quick pitch, we're Digital Health Works. We do regulatory, market, and sales support. And you can catch us on our website, which you found probably through the link. So with that, the pitch is over, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can dive in and start talking about partnerships.
Great. Well, thank you, Daniel. That was really well squeezed into the time that we had left. So I hope everyone is able to maybe hang out for a few more minutes. But I think just wanted to quickly summarize what you were saying. And I think the overwhelming takeaway point is for the two parties to be aligned to kind of very explicitly upfront before you enter into any kind of agreement, is understand what that party is expecting from you and exactly what you expect from them in return, and have that, very, very obviously laid out on paper. And, being the more organized party is always a huge advantage. And I think something that maybe we can tend to fall into this trap easily with partnerships is when we enter into kind of more reactive partnerships where, you go to a networking event, you connect with someone really well, you have, similar ideas, and you're very aligned on the way you want to conduct business, and you're like, great, we should work together. How do you think these kind of reactive partnerships can be valued versus, a more strategic and proactive kind of search for partnerships where you can go out and be more methodical and kind of vetting potential partners and things like that? How do you kind of value those?
I can try to chime in on that a little bit, I guess. There's different layers of partnerships about what kind of intrinsic value that they can give an organization. Materials, services, knowledge, and experience. And maybe I'm hoping I'm going to answer your question correctly with this. But depending on what the startup is, let me give a personal example from a venture I was building some years ago. The idea was we were going to be monitoring COPD patients and asthma patients. And had built out an edge computing device that would listen to patients so that it could capture coughing. The venture's still going on, and I'm still, a shareholder in it. But back in the time when I was actively involved with it, what we saw was an opportunity to accelerate our growth as a business, or to start growing ourselves as a business, because we were still pre-revenue at the time, or still are pre-revenue. And there was a company in Australia that had algorithms that could detect COPD and asthma exacerbations. And they had been working on also an algorithm to detect COVID in the coughing of patients. So super great. But one thing that they were missing was a hardware platform on which to run this so that they can do longitudinal studies for further research. And so the partnership that I worked out with them was that we could detune our hardware product with our algorithms, so that then they could slot in their algorithms on top of it. And the output then would be a hybrid between our tech and their tech that would be able to be very precise and diagnose COPD within patients. And so this kind of partnership started off as just a casual cold call. We were interested in like what they were doing just to see if they had any ideas. And the discussions, and this is kind of, I think, how I wanted to answer the questions, didn't start off by a methodical search of looking for a partner. It was basically reading something in an article that was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to talk to them and I want to hear about what they're doing. And then that talking to them led to, oh, yeah, this is cool. Oh, yeah, I like what you're doing too. Oh, let's do more discovery work. And so the whole, I wouldn't call it a negotiation. It was just a series of conversations over the course of about a year that finally led to the what now in hindsight was an obvious partnership to work together on trying to launch a joint product together. But it took lots of discussions to kind of find the clarity of like, now I understand how we can both work together and generate mutual value in a bi-directional relationship. So that was a really positive experience that really set the stage for an interesting relationship.
Yeah.
Not kind of replacing, but maybe you could share your experience too, Romy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest thing that you said is really you don't have to struggle alone, and there's most definitely someone out there who is specialized or more experienced than you, or already committed the same mistakes in the past that you can then learn from and essentially avoid. So I think another thing that you touched on there is with kind of the all the advancements that we're seeing now in technology and AI in remote patient monitoring, a lot more sort of more hardware and more kind of traditional medical devices are incorporating these technologies into their solutions, and we're seeing a lot of kind of symbiotic relationships that are coming out of that. And I think it's a really interesting time for partnerships, especially in the MedTech and kind of digital health industry this year, because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges as well with kind of integrating the huge amounts of data and sort of machine learning algorithms that are coming out. So I think that's also something that's going to be very interesting to address in kind of future partnerships between more hardware and then more kind of digital technologies.
Great. So does anybody have questions as we're doing most of the talking that they would like to ask about maybe partnerships or current needs that you guys have? Fair enough.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I really appreciate this idea of, having a roadmap for your partnerships and thinking about it kind of longitudinally. That's in the instances where I've been in partnerships before, it's like I'm starting up a new project. I get desperate. I know I need to have partners, identify them and bring them on, but I'm not really thinking about how those needs may evolve over the course of the project as my project evolves. So I really appreciate that thought. Thank you.
Oh, sure, sure. Just to kind of share some insight from the partnership perspective, some of the insights that I've got to, how do I best say this? I get a chance in with over my career to have spoken with people on the corporate side that are organizing partnership programs in pharma and medical devices and stuff like that. And even had the chance at some of the projects that I've worked on in my consulting career was to set up partnership programs, or at least advise in setting them up from the corporate side. And if you look at it, I mean, presumably most of us are from smaller ventures, but on the corporate side, though, it's really quite interesting because they struggle too with how to shape partnerships too. So from their perspective, it's like, well, we know we need to get information from outside of our organization because our organization's struggling with something. Like there was one device manufacturer that, I'm gonna, obviously they have to stay anonymous, but confess that they struggle with a mindset that is just a bunch of engineers building products because they think it's a good idea, and they don't have like a design first mentality. But more importantly, once they get into it, they have such a, kind of I wouldn't call it a stoic process, but a staid process where they don't understand how to be nimble and adaptive, because they're used to building medical products. Here's how our quality system says we need to build it. This is how we document requirements, and this is how we march forward once there's been a commitment from management to do something. And the perspective is that that doesn't need to be that way, but you can still be compliant with your regulatory stuff. And so from them, they looked at it outside to build partnerships to gain insight and knowledge about how are you doing it? How are you approaching the problem? How are you jumping through, the challenge of molding an idea into a product in a regulated space in a pace that's much faster than what we can do, so that we can maybe learn some ideas and motivate our team to have more of an open mind about their product development process. So that was one partnership. Another one is frankly looking for ones where they could find partners for co-marketing and some sort of drug discoveries and things like that. But their motivation was still the same. They need to go outside their organization to find the innovation and inspiration that they need for fuel to help their teams continue with their work. So that's something to always keep in mind too when you're going into these things. What's the other side really going to get for it, and what problems are they struggling with that you, as a partner, even if it's not a revenue-based kind of collaboration, can still help them with.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think just kind of coming back to the sort of planning of the timeline of partnerships and sort of strategically thinking about that. In my experience, coming almost exclusively from a startup environment where things happen very quickly and decisions and even partnerships can happen very quickly. Being able to think ahead and plan in advance, okay, we would like to have, ideally target this large corporation for a partnership in the future, knowing that is going to take, months, if not years, to even get something in place, to even get the first kind of confirmation of interest, and being able to anticipate that time frame that it's going to take to work with larger corporations as a small company, I think is also crucial to at least integrate into your wider business strategy, because as a startup, we're sometimes able to react to things very quickly, but sometimes it can be frustrating with the larger corporations that will just kind of take longer and mull things over. And yeah, so I think that's also a reason why we like talking about this as a kind of plan for your partnerships.
oh,
So are
cool.
there any other
go ahead.
questions? No, I was just gonna ask for any other questions.
Oh, good. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and excuse the technical difficulties. As we're just launching these online workshops, we're using Teams, which frankly was a bit frustrating from us. So I appreciate your patience. But what we will be doing is in the next couple of days, we'll truncate the recording on this, and we'll post it online so that you can go back and reference it if you want to. But we're also going to have follow-up discussions on this, and probably have a part 2 on the partnerships, because there's actually a lot more that I could share with you, but because of the abbreviated format, I very much just wanted to be concise and focused on the partnerships 101 if you look at it that way. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch, and I really appreciate you guys being a part of it.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.